Have you ever watched someone be so utterly, impossibly perfect around their partner that it made you squirm a little? You know that feeling when someone laughs at every joke a bit too enthusiastically, agrees with every opinion a bit too quickly, and never, ever seems to have a bad day or a messy moment. That's the vibe people are getting from Paul Watts whenever Maurice Sam enters the room, and honestly, the internet can't decide if they're watching a love story or a one-woman Broadway show. Because here's the thing about perfection, it's exhausting to maintain, impossible to believe, and usually hiding something underneath all that sparkle. When someone becomes a flawless version of themselves around another person, you have to wonder, are they in love, or are they terrified of being left behind? The problem with trying too hard is that everyone can see the effort. When Pearl smiles just a little too brightly, when her voice goes up an octave around Maurice Sam, when she seems to anticipate his every need before he even voices it, it doesn't read as devotion. It reads as performance anxiety. Real love is messy. It's showing up with yesterday's makeup still smudged under your eyes. It's disagreeing about where to eat dinner for the 15th time this month. It's being weird, being moody, being completely yourself and knowing that person will still choose you tomorrow. But what Paul seems to be doing? That's not love. That's auditioning. And the truly heartbreaking part is that she might not even realize she's doing it, because when you spend enough time walking on eggshells around someone, you forget what it feels like to walk normally. Here's what nobody talks about enough: when you change yourself to fit someone else's idea of perfect, you don't just lose little pieces of who you are, you lose the ability to recognize yourself in the mirror. One day you're speaking your mind freely, and the next you're carefully editing every sentence before it leaves your mouth. One day you're confident in your quirks, and the next you're apologizing for taking up space. Pearl's transformation around Maurice Sam isn't just about putting on a pretty face for the cameras, it's about the quiet erosion of self that happens when you believe your authentic self isn't enough. And that's the real tragedy here, not that she's performing, but that somewhere along the way, she started believing the performance was necessary for survival. When love makes you smaller instead of bigger, when it makes you whisper instead of speak, when it makes you shrink instead of expand, that's not love at all. That's fear wearing love's costume. Social media has turned relationships into spectator sports, and Paul Watts is playing in front of the toughest crowd imaginable. Every smile gets analyzed. Every gesture gets screenshot. Every interaction gets dissected by thousands of strangers who think they can read minds through pixels. And here's where it gets really messy. Pearl might have internalized all of that pressure. She might look at the comments, see fans shipping her with Maurice Sam, watch videos of their cutest moments compiled by people who've never met them, and think, this is what love is supposed to look like. But social media love isn't real love, it's highlight reels and carefully chosen angles and moments edited to perfection. When your relationship becomes content, when every date becomes a potential post, when every kiss is performed for an invisible audience of millions, you stop living your relationship and start producing it. And production requires perfection, which requires pretending, which requires slowly losing yourself in the process. The chemistry between Pearl and Maurice Sam on screen is undeniable, that's literally their job as actors. But fans have made a critical error that honestly, we all make sometimes. They've taken the sparks that fly during scripted romance and assumed those same fireworks exist when the camera stops rolling. And maybe Pearl made that same mistake. Maybe she felt something electric during their scenes together and confused it with destiny. Maybe she saw how beautifully they looked together in promotional photos and thought, this must be real. But chemistry isn't love. Chemistry is exciting and intoxicating and it makes your heart race, but it's also temporary if there's nothing deeper underneath. It's the difference between a firework and a bonfire. One burns bright and fast and fades into smoke, while the other provides warmth and light for hours. The question is, has Pearl been chasing fireworks while pretending she's found her bonfire? Fame does something peculiar to relationships. It adds a third party to every intimate moment, and that third party is everyone watching. When you're famous, you can't just be in love, you have to be in love in a way that makes sense to strangers. You can't just fight and make up, you have to worry about how the fight looks to people who would judge you without context. You can't just exist in your relationship, you have to perform your relationship for validation. And that's where things get dangerously complicated for Pearl and Maurice Sam. Every time they are spotted together, fans scream about their undeniable connection. Every time they interact online, it gets turned into evidence of something deeper. The public has already written their love story, cast them in their roles, and decided how the plot should unfold. But what if Pearl and Maurice Sam don't even know what their story is yet? What if they are still figuring it out? Or worse, what if there's nothing to figure out, but the pressure to perform a romance is so overwhelming that Pearl keeps showing up anyway, playing a role she never auditioned for? Let's talk about fear, because fear is the puppet master pulling Pearl's strings, making her dance in ways that look like love but feel like desperation. Fear of rejection. Fear of not being enough. Fear of losing Maurice Sam to someone funnier, prettier, more effortlessly perfect. Fear of public humiliation if things fall apart. Fear of admitting she might have gotten it wrong. And here's the cruelest trick fear plays: it can make you act exactly like you're in love. Fear makes you agreeable because disagreeing might push them away. Fear makes you attentive because inattention might make them lose interest. Fear makes you perfect because imperfection might give them a reason to leave. But underneath all that sweet, accommodating behavior, there's no peace. There's just a person constantly calculating, constantly adjusting, constantly terrified that one wrong move will end everything. That's not love, that's hostage negotiation with your own heart. The approval-seeking pattern is perhaps the saddest part of Pearl's story, because it reveals something deeply human, the belief that if we can just be perfect enough, we'll finally be loved the way we desperately need to be loved. But here's the plot twist nobody wants to hear: when you seek approval instead of connection, when you chase admiration instead of understanding, you doom the relationship from the start. Because the person you're with falls in love with the performance, not the performer. They fall for the edited version, the highlight reel, the person who never complains or cries or has bad breath in the morning. And then you're trapped, because the moment you stop performing, the moment you reveal the human underneath the highlight reel, they might decide they don't recognize you anymore. Pearl might be building a house of cards with Maurice Sam, each card a perfect moment, a flawless smile, an agreeable response, and she's terrified to breathe too hard because the whole thing might collapse. Maurice Sam himself is an interesting piece of this puzzle, because his natural charisma and charm create an illusion that might not even be his fault. He's likable. He's talented. He photographs well. Fans look at him and see the perfect leading man, and they've cast Pearl as his perfect leading lady without bothering to ask if either of them wants these roles. When you're naturally charming, people project depth onto you that might not exist. They see chemistry and assume intimacy. They see comfort and assume commitment. But what if Maurice Sam is just being his authentic self, and Pearl is the one spinning it into something bigger, something more meaningful, something worth performing for? The tragedy might be that he's just living his life while she's starring in a movie only she can see, playing both the romantic lead and the obsessed fan who ships them together. Living under the microscope of public scrutiny turns every relationship moment into an archaeological dig site, with millions of amateur archaeologists analyzing every tiny fragment for meaning. Did he look at her a certain way? Did she touch his arm for a second too long? Did they use the same emoji in separate posts? It must mean something. But the truth is, sometimes a friendly smile is just a friendly smile. Sometimes chemistry is just chemistry. Sometimes what looks like romance to millions of strangers watching from their phones is just two people trying to navigate a weird, complicated situation while everyone else writes fanfiction about their lives. Pearl and Maurice Sam have become characters in other people's stories, and those stories have nothing to do with reality. But when enough people believe something, when enough people insist they see it, even the people involved start to question their own experience. Maybe Pearl started performing the relationship everyone insisted she was already in. Real love, and this is the part that makes Pearl's situation so heartbreaking, should feel like coming home. It should feel like taking off uncomfortable shoes after a long day. It should feel like the deep exhale you didn't know you were holding in. Real love lets you be weird, be wrong, be wonderfully imperfect, and still feel completely safe. It doesn't require strategic Instagram posts or calculated public appearances or carefully maintaining an image of perfection. It doesn't make you smaller or quieter or less yourself. It shouldn't feel like you're constantly auditioning for a role you already got. When you find real love, you know because you stop performing and start just being. You'll argue about stupid things and laugh about them later. You'll wake up looking terrible and they'll still think you're beautiful. You'll have bad days and good days and boring days, and none of it will require a perfect smile or a flawless performance. Pearl's journey with Maurice Sam, whatever it actually is, shows us what happens when we confuse performance with connection, when we mistake approval for affection, when we believe that perfect behavior will create perfect love. So here's where we land with Pearl Watts and Maurice Sam. Nobody watching from the outside can definitively say what's real and what's performance, what's love and what's fear dressed up in love's clothing. But the signs are there, flashing like neon warnings in the dark. The two perfect smiles. The calculated agreeableness. The way she seems to shrink and expand depending on his presence. Maybe it's love and we're all wrong. Maybe she's genuinely, authentically happy and just happens to be perfect around him. But more likely, she's trapped in a cycle of seeking approval from someone who may or may not even want to give it, performing a relationship for an audience that demands it, and losing herself piece by piece in the process. If you see yourself in Pearl's story, if you've ever caught yourself editing your personality for someone else, if you've ever felt exhausted by the effort of being perfect, if you've ever wondered when you stopped being yourself, this is your wake-up call. Real love doesn't require a performance. It requires presence. So ask yourself, are you being loved for who you really are, or for how well you can pretend? Drop a comment if you've ever felt like Pearl, stuck between being real and being perfect. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, send them this piece. Sometimes we all need permission to stop performing and start living.